It should not have come from this barren woman. She was shameful. Yet God lifted her up. God made her something special. Same thing with Mary, this teenage unwed girl. All of a sudden, she should not be the one bearing the Messiah under any circumstances. And yet there she was. And so no wonder their minds were scattered. And no wonder that they were living in confusion. And it says when the crowd went away, empty-handed, it's because God had remembered these people whose society had discounted and thrown away, and probably even shamed and even bullied. And God held them up. And God was holding them through this whole process, this whole story. And there's a reason that Luke takes it 2 to almost 3 full chapters to tell this story. Because that's Luke's focus. The whole thing is God hasn't forgotten you, even if you feel like you're a nothing. Even if you have struck out in all of life 3 times, a dozen times. In God's world, that doesn't matter. In the world of God, in the coming reign of Jesus, everybody has value and worth. And that's going to be lived out in so many different ways. But in the meantime, for me, the biggest takeaway from our gospel this morning, and this is to me so powerful and so important that we hear this, that they were living in the 2 responses to God acting in the world. One is living in faithful anticipation of the promise, even before it's fulfilled. Living in faithful anticipation of God's promises, even before they're fulfilled. I think that's really important we hang on to that. The other response is to be faithful after the fact, of course, after God acts. And then our faithful response, of course, is to be faithful. But I think the hard thing is for us to live in that in-between time, in that time of anticipation. It's not easy, especially if society is bullying us for whatever reason. If society is somehow putting us down for whatever reason. God steps up and says, you have value. You are mine. I claim you for my kingdom. Everyone. That's everyone. Well, that changes how we treat each other. And it changes how we respond, in this world where it seems every time you turn on the news, it's some sort of divisive group, one against the other. And the whole time is God saying, but yet you are all my children. All of you. You are all mine. And regardless of what society or whoever is saying what, you still have value and worth. All of you. That's the Christmas promise that Elizabeth and Mary are both waiting on. That's the anticipation that they're living in that moment. Even as they both sing praises to God before it's ever happened, before the prophet's born, before the Messiah is born, they're both singing praises to God in anticipation that God will come through and do what God said God was going to do. That's where we are. That's where we find ourselves. We live in the promise post-resurrection, that's true. But before second coming, that's true also. So time hasn't been fulfilled, but we're called to live as if it already were. And all we have to do is read these stories to see how God responded to all of God's people, to see how God really calls all of us to respond to each other and who our neighbors are. And sometimes, I think we're surprised, because sometimes it's the person who struck out, the person who cost, maybe their whole family the game of life for whatever reason. They're still beloved. They're still lifted up. They still hold value. And God calls us to love them every bit as much as God already has. Amen? Amen. May the peace which passes all human understanding keep all of our hearts and all of our minds in Christ Jesus our Lord. Amen.